Thanks everybody for coming. We'll just go ahead and get started. Hopefully you're here for the right session, right? We're talking about Cloud Ready Netcool Operations Insight. I know I've talked to several people over the last couple of days about are you receiving any pressure to move to cloud, right? Move your operations support systems, including Netcool, to the cloud. Do you want to move them to virtualization, and do you want to move them to containers? So what's that conversation look like? So I'm hoping that sometime during this session we can make it interactive, and I definitely saved a little time at the end to ask questions and do interaction that way too. So I'm just going to give you a couple of key points today. Obviously, I'm from Gen E. We're a partner of IBM. I'm a technical account manager. I work with customers around the US, mostly service providers, but I also work with enterprises, financial companies, and gas and oil. What we do is a combination of software. We have our own software. We resell IBM software, and we do services. So we do the installations and consulting and building up your environment for you. As you can see on I guess it's on your left, we have a reference architecture that's built of these products. On the right, our software would fall into the AI ops category. So we have machine learning and AI technologies in our solution. We also offer managed services. So if you had an environment that you wanted to spin up, or if you wanted to use Netcool software or any of our software suite, and you didn't want to manage it yourself on your own premise, or if you were open to having it in the cloud, we could manage that for you, all the system administration for that. And then lastly, professional services, right? So I mentioned the actual stand up and tear down of the services. If you wanted to do upgrades, migrations, implement new projects, that kind of, and training if you wanted to come on site. So that's Gen E. Now what I wanted to talk to you about today is why do we want to put Netcool in the cloud? So real quick, before we get started, of the folks in this room, how many of you are getting a push either from your IT operations team or have your own internal push to move to the cloud? And when I say cloud, I mean any kind of cloud technology. Is there quite a few people in the room? Yeah. And then the second question that I've been asking is that how many of you are looking at just moving it to a virtual machine? And then the other half of that would be, are you looking to do containers as well? So virtual machines, VM's already done. Okay, so I think that's what I've heard. Most of the customers I've been around have already in a virtual machine. And then containers, are you guys interested in containers? That's what we're talking about today. Okay. So the first question that I wanted to answer is why do you want to do this, right? Hopefully, we're not all isolated in an operations and a service management bucket without being influenced by what the lines of business are doing out there. So every industry, hopefully you know, is being, oh wow, they have a really exciting presentation over there. Yes! So in a little while, I'm going to count to 10 and then we all got to scream and see if we can. No, every industry is being transformed, and a lot of that's around how you interact with your customers, right? The touch points, the omni-channel that you'll hear, and giving them the ability to interact and spin up services on demand, which you didn't do potentially in the past. I always think of industries like, you think of companies like Kodak, Blockbuster, who refused to do the transformation, right? And now you don't even hear their names anymore. So every industry is being touched by that. And I like this quote: digital transformation marks a radical rethinking, right, of how your organization uses technology, processes, and people to radically change your business performance. So all the like I said, all the touch points, all the services that you offer. If you were a telco, the mantra has been that you don't want to be a dumb bit pipe. You want to have value add on top of that. In financial industries, people are trying to give their customers all the extra ability to do service on their phones, right? So again, the whole transformation. Along with that transformation, there's also all these buzzwords that are flying around we'll say in the cloud, but as you are being pushed to move to the cloud, you're being asked to do this in an agile, you're being asked to do this with DevOps practices. You want to transform your apps to cloud native. You'll hear people throwing around terms like 12-factor app. In the service provider world, you're hearing terms like NFE and SDN, transforming the network to cloud-based services and transforming those to on-demand and software-defined services. And then also microservices. So part of this shift, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, is the first phase of moving to the cloud is taking your application and kind of like taking a forklift and putting it in a virtual machine. I heard a couple of people say they've moved them to VMs already. A lot of times that's the existing code as it is, and it's put into a virtual machine. You're in the cloud, right? You could probably check a box for your VP at that point, but you're not really taking advantage of a real cloud architecture and cloud native. Microservices is when you blow up that application into a bunch of smaller functional components, right, that can be distributed and scaled horizontally. If one of them dies, you've heard the pets and cattle analogy probably. If one of them dies, you shoot it and you put it down like cattle rather than pets and having all their names. And you want to take care of them and they're special, right? So microservices is one of the technologies that enables that. And then also AI and ML. Everybody's talking about AI and ML. I think I scanned on my THINK events app and I probably saw 100 of them that had AI or ML or some combination of both of those. But that's also a push that's coming in from executives right down to the OSS and service assurance teams that you need to address. Oh, that's just I lost my slide. So why are we doing Netcool in particular into the cloud? So your business is already doing this. You're already being pushed that direction for a variety of reasons. Lines of businesses are adopting these new technologies and they're moving that way. And cloud actually is going to help you enable that digital transformation. So if you think about being able to react by deploying new services more quickly, take advantage of new functions and new features that are coming out of your tools teams more quickly, cloud is going to give you that iterative process, that ability to start adopting something that looks more like a DevOps practice and using agile methodologies. And then also, as those applications become fully cloud native, you'll have that clustering type effect where you can scale horizontally and you can scale on demand and as needed. So again, cloud and Netcool's taken the first step in this direction. And then of course you don't want to be left behind. And when I say this, I kind of say it in jest, but being left behind in the OSS world, if you think throughout the years, hopefully, I think a lot of people in here look like you've got some experience. In some of the sessions I've been in, they made jokes about gray hair and experience and age, but IT operations has been kind of notorious for trying to play to the governance side of things, right? So when you request hardware from IT operations, back in the day, IT operations was 5 nines. You just moved the decimal over one place, and you were still 5 nines, right? And you could turn on new services and new applications. And to me, 20 years ago, IT was fast, but now it's no longer fast, right? They're under governance, and they have to provide support for the applications they spin up and the hardware that they spin up, and it's got to be patched because you're constantly being attacked from the outside. So it could take months before you get a new server to install an application on. From an OSS tools team, you don't want to be like that. You don't want to say, I need to take weeks to analyze these new sources of data that you want to send into my system. You can't do that anymore because lines of business are out there and they're taking DevOps approaches. You have developers that they're hiring in-house, right? Hopefully everybody's kind of relating to this, right? And they're going out swiping their credit cards with AWS or IBM Cloud, deploying their applications to IBM Cloud and actually building those, testing them, and even monitoring those on demand, real time, completely outside of your environment, right? So if you stand up a new application, it's being monitored, they're doing their DevOps, sometimes those go into production just like they are. So you could get left behind in that case, and not necessarily in the sense that they're doing things better than you, but they're just doing it separate from you. So when those applications go down and they come call you and say, what's going on? You're going to say, well, hey guys, you never put me in the loop. And they're going to say, well, that's because you're too slow. All right, so why do hopefully that gives you some of the idea why I want to put Netcool in the cloud. Now I want to talk about some of the things the initial steps that IBM has taken to make the Netcool cloud ready. So first of all, one of the benefits of what we've done, I'm going to say the collective we, right, we're a business partner. What we've done is we've taken Netcool and the components and put them in containers, Docker containers, and these are deployable in IBM Cloud Private, which is managed by Kubernetes. And with the click of a button, as you can see here, 15 minutes, time to deploy. I got to tell you, that's if you have your cloud environment already set up to the specs that NOI are expecting. If you already have that set up, which could take more than 15 minutes, when you click the button to do the deploy, it is really quick. You fill out a couple of parameters on a form, you hit deploy, and it literally goes out and it stands up a highly available single-tiered environment. Just like that, just click of a button, it's amazing. And then also, because it's in containers, and we are taking advantage of container best practices where you store your data outside the container, the stateful information, when you need to do an upgrade, like let's say you need to move from an older version of the object server to a newer version of the object server, you can rip out the old container and put in the new container to replace it, right? So just taking it offline, simply replacing it, all your configuration information will be stored offline, and you spin up the new instance. There's a lot of power in that, which I'll talk about a little bit, but when you're trying to keep up with the agile practices of other teams, it's actually going to help you stay up to date a lot simpler. And then within IBM Cloud, there's some ability to manage those infrastructure in a lightweight fashion, some dashboards that are built into ICP that give you some initial views of what's going on. I know most folks, if you're in the service management world, may have a big APM install or some sort of big Netcool environment with hooks into applications, and you could manage them that way as well, but there is some lightweight capabilities built into ICP to take advantage of. So what I wanted to talk to you about is looking at Agile OSS DevOps, right? So this is kind of a shift in thinking from a Netcool perspective, right? If you come into a Netcool environment, or I'll just say it generically, right? Any OSS environment, people have a tendency to kind of go through things real systematically, which you have to, right? And implement things in test, validate that they're working, and then do some QA testing and then push them into production. Your application teams are adopting these processes, but the way that's probably been done in the past is through a waterfall method, right? You have these big release cycles and you have big iterative, huge time frames in between these iterative chunks. And as you're looking at the lines of businesses, they're adopting a much quicker iterative process. IBM is moving that way with the tools that we're delivering. Again, the collective, we delivering in a much quicker fashion with quicker releases. And if you're not moving in this cycle of continuous integration and continuous delivery, you're not going to be able to take advantage of those features as fast, and you'll get left behind. And I've seen many Netcool customers in the past and even today, that are still running like 7.0 versions. I saw people running 3.0 versions. I see some faces smiling out there. If you're running old versions of Netcool, you're missing out on lots of new features and improvements in performance, right? So when you start to receive this wave of new data from the transformation, your environment won't be able to keep up. And this is all, again, simplified because you're in containers and you can automate the deployment. Also, becoming a part of the life cycle of those teams as they develop new apps. I want you to think about the line of business developing their app. If they're tooling the app with some free open source or some tool that comes with the cloud environment and monitoring it that way, and they're not actually including you in the loop, then you get that divergence, right? You have the monitoring that they're used to and the monitoring that you're providing they're completely separate, and you may or may not meet the same requirements. If you're able to start being more agile and be in the cloud, you could spin up a new probe, for example, to be hooked into that environment on demand. So as they come to you with requirements, you can say, absolutely, and in short order, I can provide you with a new hook into my environment. So you become the monitoring in those new applications, and you become a part of the testing cycle in their Agile DevOps. So talking about the Netcool environment, adopting a DevOps and Agile mentality, but also coming alongside of the other parts of your organization, the other IT operations customers who are using your services, that you come together with them and provide them this service. Hopefully that's making sense too. And then another big headache is upgrades. I mentioned this a little bit already. Whenever you're coming into a Netcool environment, it can get really large. Some of you probably have big environments. Even a pretty straightforward HA Netcool environment is built across many servers. You have object servers, gateways, probes, your display visualization, you have your impact servers, you have primaries and backups. Maintaining and upgrading and keeping all this up to date is a really big problem. But when you're in a container, you have the, like I said earlier, you have the ability to take that and separate out your stateful data from the container and just rip it out and replace it. I mean, so Netcool, the first step into the cloud world, it is still kind of a forklift, but the good thing about Netcool is we already started out with the HA architecture, right? So you have this primary and backup concept where you can shut down the primary, run on your backup. You can do it, but you can do it very, very quickly. In the past, the best approach to upgrading a Netcool environment really is standing up a whole separate environment and migrating things over slowly. I have customers going through that process right now. You spin up new servers or take advantage of old servers, repurpose them, do a complete top to bottom install, because each component takes a little bit of time. But in a cloud, containerized world, it's so fast that you could literally just shut it down and spin up the new instance. And the customers your end users will barely see what's going on there. So two other reasons that I've shared the slide together is big data ready. How many of you are being pushed also to use some sort of big data solution, either pumping everything to Hadoop or Elasticsearch? Yep. I've seen this in a lot of customers, and the initiative comes first to aggregate all the data and then push it into a single location. And there's coming along analytics coming after that. But the great thing about going ahead and implementing a containerized and cloud-based solution today is that this environment, the cloud environment, ICP, is ready for big data. There's several other sessions I noticed for ICP and big data. And the idea there is you can scale horizontally and again easily take advantage of cloud native architectures and deploy these at the same time as your Netcool environment. So if you're taking advantage of these technologies at the same time as your big data team, then you're staying up to par. And then operations ready. The cool thing I kind of was hinting at with the upgrades is you can move your workloads on demand and simply. So if you are monitoring a Netcool environment, one of the things that can happen is hardware failures, right? Hardware is eventually going to fail. And if any of you guys are around the hardware guys, they'll immediately pipe up and say, well, software will eventually work. So if you start out with the idea that hardware is going to fail, being on a containerized environment, you can, again, move things and update things very quickly. The benefit of that is if you imagined a 3-node cluster and you have a primary and a backup Netcool object server on the first 2 nodes and you have a hardware failure on the first one, you'll start to see that degraded performance, right? Your APM tools will pick that up. You can, with a simple click of a button, Kubernetes style, you can migrate that object server, because it is in a container, very simply, less than a minute, and the end user at the UI layer probably won't ever see that. Without containers, moving a new object server to a new server, if you're really elegant and you stand it up and you turn one off and you start to change IPs and things like that, it may be somewhat seamless, but it's definitely a lot more clunky if you're I'm sure you've gone through that process in the past. So moving things even in a virtual machine world is a little bit more difficult. So it's operations ready. Yep. So kind of in summary, some of the big benefits that you're getting from Netcool on ICP is that quick time to deploy, 15 minutes. You can patch and upgrade your environment in minutes because, again, the containerized technology. And you're going to reduce cost overall for your environment because you're becoming more efficient in all these moves. If you think about how quickly you can stand up and tear down those environments, it's a huge improvement. A couple of other things on being able to stand it up and tear it down quickly that I forgot to mention on the agile dev or the agile OSS concept is when you implement in Netcool, if you implement a rule, if you implement a policy, an impact, or a trigger, an action, there's never been built into Netcool a real simple way to kind of manage that in source control and in a DevOps fashion. So if you start to think about implementing those steps of a continuous delivery pipeline and storing your rules and your triggers and your policies in something like GitHub, you can build that continuous delivery pipeline. You can use something. There's a cool demo over in the expo right now, actually, of how they're managing the CEM environment, and you can see the automated delivery pipeline of checking in the source code and then automatically pushing that into a test environment. So what it kind of excites me about that is test environments a lot of times are kind of useless and wasted hardware. You want it to look just like your production, but you don't run any workload there. So why not offload that to a public cloud and run your tests in a public cloud? One of the drawbacks to a public cloud is if you spin up the infrastructure there, then it starts to cost money. But when you're in a containerized, right, in a cloud world, you could spin that up on demand. So I've made some changes, I want to test it. You can click your button, spin it up in the public cloud, go deploy those things, run your tests automatically, see if they fail or succeed. Hopefully you built your tests appropriately so you can see a success or failure criteria, and then tear them down, right? So if you're doing that on demand and tearing it down on demand, you're taking advantage of the public cloud without actually having to pay a massive cost for throwing something out there and letting it sit. And the same thing is true for the hardware, which is even more expensive on-prem, right? Which will be outdated and you have to manage. So I'll say something on that. The evolution from an IBM perspective, not to speak to a roadmap, but the direction that I'm excited about here is that this first step that I mentioned is taking the code and putting it into containers. They're also investing in cloud native architectures at the same time. There's new technologies that are available. Some of them are already tied into Operations Insight, and the path is coming together for those. In the future, they'll be the same set of code. It'll all be cloud native. It'll all look the same, and you'll have a powerful platform that's taking advantage of both the microservices and 12-factor app type approach, as well as containerized. So let me tell you just a little bit about how GenE comes along and adds value. We have, like I mentioned earlier, we have our own software. We surround and enhance Netcool. We're not coming in and trying to replace or compete with Netcool. We have solutions that, for example, additional rules files for devices that are not supported with the Netcool knowledge library out of the box. We have a new software product, though, relatively new, that's we call Op Center Transport and Op Center Analyze. So Transport is a message bus-based technology that helps you aggregate data from many data sources. We were talking about big data. Well, when you're wanting to perform analytics in a big data world, you need to aggregate lots of data, right? So this is like a Kafka-based bus architecture. And then Analyze is based on Elasticsearch. So it's our big data tool, and we have many years of experience at GenE from a Netcool perspective when we're building out use cases to help customers analyze for the first set of use cases focused on Netcool data, and then right alongside that ticket data and change. This is kind of a high level, I almost like to call it like a architecture, but if you think about what Op Center is doing, as your business is transforming, there's new types of data that are coming in. One of the examples there across the bottom is the Internet of Things. I like to point that one out because many people in the past may have had traditional networks and traditional applications out there, but some of the use cases that are coming in that we're seeing with our customers is IoT use cases. Simple things like wearables and having data coming in from customers, all the way out to really cool use cases like drones going out and inspecting facilities and equipment. That data is coming in. It's a massive amount of data, and you have to store it, and you have to be able to analyze it. What we're looking at, though, is kind of three main types of data that customers are wanting or have an interest in kind of analyzing, and that's the config data, event data, and performance data. When things are changing, right, up or down, they could be related to tickets, or it could be related to log data that says somebody logged in. 80% of the problems in most environments are related to somebody going in and changing something. Usually it's not actually a hardware failure. It's because somebody logged in and did a fat finger on the configuration or did something without permission, right? And what these fall into are two main categories you see here across the processing layer, the third layer. Structured data, which are things you know how to deal with, things that you have rules for, policies, automations that are all tied together in a well understood format. So when I say structured, I like to think well understood. That's the traditional Netcool Operations Insight. And I hate to say traditional, but in the Netcool Operations Insight world, standard event management. That's the needle in the haystack. So these are things that you've pulled out, but then you have this whole haystack of information. I would say at least half the customers I've spoken to recently, they're deleting or discarding, using Netcool terminology, 95 to 99% of their events at the probes. Does that sound familiar for most people? Discarding, yep. All the data from an operations perspective, from a NOC perspective, is not interesting if somebody logged in and logged out most of the time. What we're providing with the Ops Center piece is helping you find insights in that additional data. Things like somebody logged in could be related to a change that happened, and if you tie that together with anomalies, so we also have machine learning in here. If you tie together the fact that all of a sudden my performance metrics just went awry, right? So I got an anomaly. If you tie that to the fact that Charlie logged into the router 10 minutes before that happened, then all of a sudden you say, well, hey, Charlie, what the heck did you do? Because it looks like you were related to this problem. And what we've seen is a huge percentage, like I'm going to throw out the number 80% of problems really are tied to user related. Not sure the exact number, but in different environments it probably varies. And then across the top layer, interaction layer, we have the ability to help you tie together different visualization tools and give you a common view across multiple environments. Different than just aggregating data like Netcool does, I mean visually. One of the use cases for this capability would be, rather if you made an acquisition, you have a ticketing system and your acquisition has a ticketing system, and you don't want to go through the process, the long, laborious process of merging those two ticketing systems. But you need the value right away. This tool could allow you to take both of those ticketing systems and make them look like one. And then over time, right, and then you could apply that months and months that it takes to potentially rationalize those. So what we would best fit into is the AI ops category, because we are implementing machine learning, and we're looking at and putting in AI capabilities beyond the standard machine learning, is helping you, again, surround and enhance your operations management platform and provide a layer that helps you better correlate and better manage the massive amount of data that's out there. So that's what Ops Center is coming alongside. And then just a little bit more about Gen E customers. I like the graphic that was put in here. We work with all sizes of customers. Netcool users are a big part of our base. They can be small customers, they can be new customers, they can be large, or they can be well-established customers. We've worked with the whole gamut there. We're across industries. So it's not just telcos, although me personally, I have 20 years of experience in the telco world. So transforming your business and especially your operations team to match that is what we're specializing in. And related to the topic, I know that some concrete example, I probably should have done this quicker, a concrete example of a Netcool use case. We're working with a customer today who is looking to, it's a startup. So this is a company that has no network, no customers yet. They're going to aggregate together a whole bunch of rural broadband companies. So they want to go from nothing to a very large network in the course of a year, but they are very cost conscious because they are ramping up this business, right? So one of the first things they asked for was, can we just do this with SaaS? And my immediate response is, of course you can do this with SaaS. There's CEM from IBM. And then we showed them CEM, and they're like, this is a good portion of what we want, but actually what we want is also the capabilities that you have in a full-blown Netcool environment. So they're asking for things like a topological map and correlations. And we're like, okay, so now you're leaning more towards a full Netcool install. And if you buy the licenses for where you're going to be in a year, it's actually a pretty expensive product, especially if you're looking at starting from zero. So we're looking at helping them grow with the functionality by managing the service for them on an ICP environment. We're going to do this containerized in Kubernetes, build out a Netcool stack and manage it, and then they'll buy the licenses as they go along and implement this and increment it. Incrementally grow it. So as they make their acquisition targets, they'll have a chunk of new devices that they need to incorporate into their environment and grow it. So this is a great use case for doing the Netcool containerized environment, because you can spin it up on demand add the new capabilities and scale it as you need to. I'm going to pause there. I'll just go ahead and mention the last slide, and then I'll take questions. Also, another thing that Jenny's championing right now is kind of revitalizing the Netcool user group. I wanted to mention that, and anybody who's out there who's using Netcool, who's interested in having those technical discussions and relearning use cases that other customers are and sharing that experience. There's been many throughout the years. There's one in Dallas that hasn't had a post on the LinkedIn page in like four years, right? So these are kind of fizzled out. But what we're going to do is try to revitalize that. We're partnering with IBM, of course, to bring content to that, and we'll do surveys and find out what people are doing. But so I think netcooluser.org is the URL, and there's a LinkedIn page. Look for this logo though, because like I said, there's some that are old ones that have kind of fizzled out through the years, and join that.